Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media. Charles, joined by Bel, as always, here to go over another week of Seattle sports. This is the end of January. It felt like January dragged on. I mean, I don't know about you, but it felt like we've kind of dragged on. We're here at the 31st today, finally, and things will only get more interesting from here on out.
Yeah, so there's a lot happening starting February. A lot of seasons kicking off, free agency kicking off. But for me, my January felt like it was way fast, and I was not prepared for February yet. So we're just going to dive right in our first segment on the Seahawks. We have a few things to note with the Seahawks. Quandre Diggs headlined the All NFC honors. So he was selected to the Pro Football Writers of America's All NFC team as well. And of course, he's expressed interest in coming back to the team. But given his good season, he wants to be accurately compensated as well, which, I mean, would you say that it's deserved?
Oh, I mean, come on. At least in my opinion, Quandre Diggs had the best season of any free safety in the league last year, and was, I don't know if it's arguably. I know that in our season recap, I gave the Defensive Player of the Year honor to somebody else, but that was more due to the situation. I think that Quandre Diggs was the best player on the defensive side of the ball last year. You know, it's tough with injuries and such. You know, Jamal Adams goes down, Bobby Wagner goes down, second to last game of the year. But just in terms of a guy who made a huge jump, you know, was playing some cornerback in Detroit just a few years ago before we traded like a fifth rounder for him. And then once we traded for him, I know the game that was played right after that was I think it was the game against the 49ers on Monday Night Football, and had an interception in that game. Immediate impact. Quandre Diggs has been a valuable part of this secondary, let alone this defense, you know, since being acquired by Seattle. And he's been playing for a small amount of money. So to lock him up, I think we talked about it in that 3 to 4 year range would be ideal. And I'd say I'm not good with cap space. I am not the football numbers guy. I'm not the contract numbers guy at all. But if we're looking at it, say 12 to 14 million a year is serviceable. I mean, I know your friend on your laptop there, Devontae Adams, wants $30 million a year, which is insane. That's like monopoly money.
That's a top wide receiver in comparison there.
Yeah, but I mean, $30 million is just incredible to think about. But, you know, 3 to 4 years, I think if you're asking me if he's earned it, I'd say absolutely.
Yes, I agree. I didn't think that there was going to be any pushback from you, just like there wasn't from me. And hopefully the Seahawks get him what he deserves as well. In other news, Russell Wilson will actually be playing quarterback for the NFC in the Pro Bowl. He is stepping in place of Tom Brady, who is injured and can no longer play. Following with the Tom Brady news here, not to not give Russell his praise, I just kind of wanted to dive in and mention that Tom Brady is not yet officially retiring. There were several reports over the weekend that said that he would be retiring and that he had made his decision, but there were also reports pushing back saying that he had not actually made that decision yet. Do you think that plays into his absence from the Pro Bowl at all?
I wouldn't say so, because I can't tell you when I've seen Tom Brady play in a Pro Bowl. Yeah. So I think he just skips those anyway. It's an interesting decision that's going to be made. I remember seeing the initial headline, you know, reported by Adam Schefter that Tom Brady was retiring. It was just kind of like, hey, this is weird, because Tom Brady has been playing football longer than I've been alive. Okay. We'll put that into perspective. It'll age some people. I'm sorry about that. Yes. Okay. It's a really interesting situation, because the Buccaneers have some decisions to make. You know, I know Gisele Bündchen's like, hey, I don't like seeing you get hit. I need you to retire. You've got kids. Yeah. You know, and there's obviously the family aspect of it that comes into play so many times when retirements come up, right? And being injured, right? I mean, his body, you know, as much fitness as he does, as much of the TB12 program he's got going on, guys like Aaron Donald are going to hit you, and it's going to hurt. Right. And your knees can only take so much. Those frail old legs of his can only take so much. So I wouldn't doubt that he retires, but also knowing the player and the competitor that Tom Brady is, I doubt that he goes out in the divisional round like that.
Okay.
I just don't think he would. So if we're giving me a concrete answer, I'm saying no. I don't think he's done.
You don't think he's done?
Mm-mm.
Okay, that's interesting. I heard reports just saying that he was mentioning to family members the situation that happened with Kobe and how life can be so short. So that being an influence. And I think that if he did choose to retire now, he didn't go out without a fight. And I would say that maybe he could be satisfied with the ending.
It's just tough.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, a guy that gets ticked off at like some of the smallest slights and is such a competitor, I would expect him to not go out. Like, you know, you'd think he'd want to go out on top. But also, like you're saying, I mean, I'm sure he does think about that kind of thing, you know, going out when the time is right and not just trying again and again. I mean, you look at like Peyton Manning and Big Ben's careers, they were just horrid quarterbacks at the end of their careers. And I'm sure, I mean, if you look at him right now, I would say he's got like 2 years left
I
of
agree.
playing solid football.
Yeah.
So, but it also, it's like, hey, maybe like you were saying, maybe he's like, I've done what I need to. 7 championships, 3 MVPs. You know, more than likely the greatest player of all time, and that's, you know, debate your mother about that. That's a whole different conversation. But it is just something interesting to think about, you know. But it was really such a whirlwind. I get the notification from Adam Schefter, and then it's like, hold on, you know, he's telling his GM, I haven't made a decision yet. I'm not close to a decision, you know. So that's something to think about. And because it affects the entire football world. Because if we're looking at it, the Seahawks aspect, it clears out the NFC. It just takes another contender out of the NFC. So that'll be really interesting to follow and see how that goes.
Definitely left his mark in the NFL, and he'll go out a champion in everyone's eyes. So regardless of his decision, we wish him the best. In other league news, there will now be a Senior Bowl. It's debuting first ever NFL Combine for student athletes of HBCUs. If you don't know what an HBCU is, it's a historically Black college and university. So that's interesting, and surprised that it took them this long to bring that in, actually.
It's a big deal, you know, for more than one reason. You know, having the Senior Bowl itself is cool for college athletes and all that, but to have one for historically Black colleges and universities, it's a big deal. You know, with Deion Sanders going to coach Jackson State, that was a big step in itself. It's like, hey, this is prime time. This is the best cornerback of all time. You know, just the impact that he has as a player there is a big deal, right?
Yeah.
You know, because I think he had spoken with Florida State about a job like that, you know, his alma mater, but deciding, hey, let's go a different route, right? And then I think you saw it recently, I believe it was in December, the top recruit in the nation flipped from Florida State to Jackson State because of Deion Sanders. And I mean, he's just had there's a lot of momentum right now, and I think that's great. And I think it is great that they're going to have a combine, you know, for HBCUs at the Senior Bowl. I mean, I think that should have been, it just puts more athletes on a showcase. I know that 2019, Bobby Wagner each week would have a clothing item or an apparel item from each of the HBC, well, not each of them, but an HBCU, each different week, and showcase them each different week. So I thought that was really cool. So this is just more momentum. I know that on a smaller note, well, not smaller, not necessarily, but Grambling State is going to have an NIL deal for all scholarship athletes that they can have a annual income. That's a big deal. I mean, as someone in college, that's a big deal, you know. So it's really cool to just follow this, and I figured that was something that, you know, especially, you know, being here at Converge, it should be talked about. And it's incredible to see that, you know, to see what Deion's doing there, but also, you know, you see this with the Senior Bowl. So there's good momentum here.
That's good. And we hope that it continues and people will get the looks that they need. And hopefully that brings a lot more talent into the NFL. Last thing to touch on is that our Super Bowl 56 matchup is set. We have the Bengals facing the Rams on February 13th. So who are we looking to as hoping to win here.
This should be an obvious answer. Whoever was coming out of the AFC was going to be who I was rooting for, at least. And at least if you're a Seahawks fan, that should be obvious as well. Go Bengals. Go Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. They've got talent. It's going to be a good game. It should be a good game. I don't expect the Rams to put up 3 points like their last Super Bowl appearance. I'm sure that might sting for them, at least the people who were on the roster at that time. Obviously playing with a different quarterback now. But yes, go Bengals, in short.
Agreed. So going ahead and handing it off to you for a Mariners update.
We have, again, it's since the lockout has begun, Mariners news and MLB news as a whole have really just kind of shrunk down to size like Ant-Man. There's kind of one thing to look at here. I mean, this has been present since the free agency period actually began. The Mariners are looking into outfielder, and they are a front runner for outfielder Seiya Suzuki. He's an outfielder from Japan, relatively good slugger. The Giants are also in the mix, but the Mariners and the Giants are supposed to be the two front runners for Suzuki. If not to compare him to Shohei Ohtani at all, because Shohei is a different talent. That's just a different beast in itself, and I believe the age range is different there as well. But when Shohei Ohtani's the sweepstake was taking place, the Mariners were the front runner to sign Shohei Ohtani. That didn't work out now, did it? It would be a great addition, but it also, you look at it, the outfield for the Mariners is already in a logjam in itself. You look at Kyle Lewis, Mitch Haniger, Jared Kelenic last year. Taylor Trammell is in the system. Jake Fraley's out there somewhere. I know that Adam Frazier can play some outfield, so you've kind of got a logjam, and there's a ton of Julio Rodriguez, the number one prospect in all of baseball, is knocking on the door. So it's interesting to think about. You'd love to add talent. I mean, if you look at it in any sport, I love to add more talent when I can, whether it's because of cap space limitations or positional limitations. See, this is why I'm glad I'm not a general manager, because I don't have to make these decisions necessarily. But in talking about it, I do, right? Because I do have to look at it. I would say do it. I would say do it now, worry about it later. You've got Julio Rodriguez, let him develop as much as he can. You can have one of those outfielders play designated hitter, because you don't necessarily have a set DH right now. It's exciting to look at, and being a front runner is nice, but it doesn't matter until that pen hits paper. And that can happen until the lockout ends. Lockout news, I mean, not much. I know that there were some meetings last week, and it was kind of like both sides put their projections onto the table, and they were like going to whittle it down to move closer, but that's all we've heard. The only league note really is that the MLB is scrapping its vaccine plan. The league is reversing course on its previous requirement for minor league players to be vaccinated for the 2022 season. So the lockout upcoming, I mean, pitchers and catchers are supposed to report to spring training in mid-February. So unless that happens this week and the lockout ends, I doubt we're looking at that. And I think last week we talked about it. The league itself is willing to lose games in the lockout, which I don't like. I don't like one bit.
It's
it just
discouraging as a fan.
Yeah. It's just like, we're going to be stubborn. If I don't get my way, screw it. You guys are going to suffer because of it, which sucks, because I know that the 1995 lockout drew a lot of people away from baseball.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, especially with how much positive momentum there is going into the Mariners this season and how much was continuing with free agency, right? Let alone the season last year and barely making the playoffs again. The youth, the way that this team fought, the last 3 games of the season, the sellout crowds.
Oh, yeah.
You sign the AL Cy Young winner, you get a guy like Adam Frazier who can, is a consistent bat, hopefully, it has the versatility to play just about anywhere on the field. And you're closing in on guys like Chris Bryant or Trevor Story, and then everything, you hit the pause button. It's tough. And I'm sure that there were people, who maybe went to those games in the last homestand or, saw it and were excited to get into baseball again because of how much hope there was. And now it's on hold because of the lockout and, the uncertainty of when we're going to get back to things. So I hope that there is a sense of, hey, this is a big deal. We need to get this taken care of before it affects our fan base, because the MLB fan base is already struggling. You already deal with blackouts around the country. People are trying to watch games. They want to watch these games. That aren't necessarily the marquee matchups. They want to, maybe you want to see the Mariners play down the stretch because you like the run that they're on, right? And you can't because there's a blackout, and it's like, we don't. There are several issues that need to be addressed, but the main one right now for the MLB is to deal with the lockout and get it out of the way. So, with that being said, and talking about real free agency, we are going to head back to Bell for the Storm.
Yes. So nothing completed yet or finalized, but of course, all that can happen this week. The Storm are looking at several players, including Courtney Vandersloot, Stephanie Dolson, Maisha Hines-Allen, Briann January, and Monique Billings. Stephanie Dolson limited her choices to both the Liberty and the Seattle, but then we also received news yesterday that she would be actually finalizing a deal with the Liberty. So didn't choose the Storm. Maisha Hines-Allen also, unfortunately, is now signing with the Washington Mystics, so that takes her off of the list. But Briann January, a 13-year veteran who spent her first 9 seasons with the Indiana Fever, went to the finals 3 times, and actually won a championship with our now assistant, correct me if I'm wrong, Pokey Chapman.
Yep.
So she won that. They won that in 2012. And that just speaks to the relationship that maybe they have and what they can bring to the team as a whole. So we'll see what moves the Storm decide to do. Again, nothing can be finalized until the 1st. Is there someone on the list here that intrigues you the most?
Oh boy, Tina Charles. I know that Tina Charles and I share a name in there.
Charles.
I'll stop being corny for a second. That's looking the possibility of having Stephanie Dolson was a big deal because I think we talked about it a week ago or 2 weeks ago. If I were to want to add anyone to this starting 5, from free agency and in the hopes that the big 3 is back, at least for this upcoming year, I need a big. Right, I need someone who can dominate the paint, sort of like Natasha Howard did, for the Storm for a while, and then she, because of cap limitations, had to be traded to New York, and is now with the Liberty. And so, Stephanie Dolson wasn't a name that I had pegged as someone who could come to Seattle or had interest in Seattle, and then she limited her choices to the Liberty and Seattle. Being from New York, I guess that makes sense to go home, right, and sign a multi-year deal. But if it's you're asking me, hey, you get to pick one thing in the catalog, like it's your birthday or Christmas or something. Tina Charles is led the league in points per game. It was like every week I would peek back in because the WNBA app's actually really helpful. You can actually watch games on that.
Yeah.
The MLB should kind of take note of that kind of thing. But I would always peek in the stats to see what's going on, see who's leading the league and such. Tina Charles's name was always front and center in points per game, and it was always by, a good amount of points. So to add a dominant big, in addition to having Sue Bird, having Jewel Lloyd, an explosive scorer, who's just gotten better year in and year in and year out, and Brianna Stewart, who arguably, when healthy, is the best player on the planet. Again, title or bust.
Dream team.
But that is, we go back to it, Jewel being the first domino to fall. But if you're asking me, it's Tina Charles. Signing Briann January is a good start. But it's interesting to think about because 13-year veteran, talked about winning a title, can play both guard spots, really good defensively, is actually from Spokane. So a little bit of a homecoming, not necessarily, but it makes you wonder about the possibility of some of your guards returning, right? Will Jordan Canada be back, who's been a great backup for the longest time? Is this any implication on Jewel Lloyd? I don't think so. I think you need to round out your bench anyway, because, we talk about getting the big 3 back so much and adding like a Tina Charles, you still need a bench, right? Any good championship team, especially in basketball, most importantly in basketball, is going to need that bench.
Yep.
So, I think that's maybe a 6-woman position there. I don't think it's anything to worry about the actual shooting guard position in state. But yes, Tina Charles, if that could happen, I know we've got some tidbits there on Tina Charles that I'll let you look at here. But that would be my dream scenario.
Yeah, okay. So she's actually not expected to be back with the Mystics. She's opening the door for her to join Seattle. So has she officially said that her interest is with Seattle? No, okay.
And that hasn't. I just know that. Well, it's funny you say that, right? Because that report came out today on the 31st that Tina Charles is not expected to be back with the Mystics. I don't think she intends to sign a deal with Washington. But there was a photo that had been posted 2 nights ago with. There's two important people, and it's a nice little dinner photo. It's some how with this pandemic, the curbside, they'll erect, no, they'll erect like the little things on the curb, the little side street eateries.
Oh,
it was one of
okay.
those. But Tina Charles and Sue Bird were sitting right next to each other.
Oh, that's a good
You
sign.
gotta think they talked about basketball. So that's just my inclination, but also the fact that Tina Charles wants to win a title, and why not do that? Help Sue Bird, put Sue Bird out on top, and that Seattle's going to go hard to make sure that happens, right? So
Right.
that's how I look at things.
And just like you said, we're waiting for Jewel Lloyd to make a decision. Sue Bird will be signing, and waiting for Brianna Stewart, who we're not really concerned about, but we know that she met with a couple teams. One team.
New
one
York.
Team. New York, yeah. So not super concerned, hoping they come back. And it looks like Mercedes Russell might also be back. So hoping to see good news starting this week. Was there anything else that you could think of here?
No, not necessarily. Just with at least going back to Stephanie Dawson, it might have been a situation of Dawson commanding too much money.
Yeah.
And I know that, you've got, I believe of the three people you have on contract right now, your young center, Ezzy Magbagor, is one of them. And Mercedes Russell, year in and year out, has improved. And again, nothing against Mercedes, but I would like, if I could get Tina Charles, I'm doing Tina Charles.
Yeah.
That is absolutely, sign me up, right? But I think, I don't think that the Mercedes Russell deal is anything related to, against signing a big, right? It's just she was already a restricted free agent, and making her a restricted free agent tells me you wanted her back anyway.
Yeah.
So I think that's, again, just like the Briann January news, it's just a free. That's just a sort of a bench having a depth kind of thing. I don't think that's
and
anything.
The secondary team is important anyway. So just like you said,
Yeah,
having
those other
bench
units.
is,
You look at whether it's men's or women's basketball. You look at some of those important playoff games or finals games. Having those second units is such a big deal. Like if your second unit can come in and sustain that lead or improve that,
you're set.
Hey man, you're set. Yeah, exactly. So
all right.
like we've been looking at, tomorrow is the day that these deals can go official. So like Bel told me before we started, we're probably going to have a lot of news for you next week, just because, I mean, free agency news has been insane anyway, and that was before the deal could officially be signed. So it'll be really interesting to see
some excitement to look forward to for the rest of the week,
where the roster sits. I mean, at this point, I think with Mercedes, right, in January, I think you've got 5 players on the roster, and I think that'll certainly go up between the first and the time we see you next week. So talking about signing people, we head over to the Sounders here. With another roster moving over the last few weeks, it's just been, the Sounders re-signed basically everybody. One of those players that was on the roster, Brad Smith, a defender, a key cog in the Sounders organization, for a couple stints, was traded to DC United. Seattle will receive $750,000 in general allocation money, giving them a little breathing room. I know that they were pressed against the cap and were low on allocation money anyway. But Seattle was effectively able to turn one of their backups into $1 million. There was this move, and then there was another one for an international spot for $250,000. So general manager Garth Lagerwey, that was pretty impressive. And it sucks because I know Brad Smith has been helped win the title in 2019, has been an influence on this roster, on the different stints that he's been with the Sounders. But with just looking at the way that the roster looks right now and looking at the depth that the Sounders have and just how jam-packed the team itself is, it makes sense to unload a guy like Smith, who's a veteran presence, will have an impact immediately at DC United. And I know they signed him to a multi-year deal anyway once he got so the value was there. And for Seattle, it was like, hey, you might have been on the chopping block. It's been great. You helped last year, especially with the way the season went last year with having so many guys down to injury or the international breaks. But we have to move on, and it sucks. But Seattle, the team itself, I know will probably function better because of it. You look at having a jam-packed roster. You don't necessarily need to have that internal conflict. Hey, I want more minutes than this guy. Why is he starting above me? When you've got so much talent in there. And I wouldn't say that situation would happen in Seattle just because of the culture that's been built with the Sounders. But I think the move just makes sense. It just makes sense. It sucks, but it makes sense, So that's something to look at. I mean, I know that we've talked about it since that sort of period for signing players has started. But, it's like you're bringing back so many people, and you're adding who you do. It's title or bust. But also you're going to have to make these moves, right? Because when you bring in so many people, there will be tough decisions to make. And again, I don't think this changes anything for Seattle. I'm still looking at it as title or bust. But it is interesting to note. I mean, the Sounders had what was it? Oh, a scrimmage match against the Timbers in Tucson that ended in a draw. So not really much to report there. Those games aren't even televised, but so we can only bite off so much there. But yes, so again, thank you to Brad Smith for his time in Seattle. The other little piece of Sounders news is that Clint Dempsey was elected to the National Soccer Hall of Fame. So the former Sounder and U.S. men's national team legend has finally been put into the National Soccer Hall of Fame. So congratulations to Clint. Moving over to our Seattle Kraken here, over the past week, played 4 teams, started their road trip, starting off with that home loss to the Nashville Predators, 2-4. Tough game. I mean, Nashville's a good team. It's funny enough, I say that Nashville was the team that the Kraken earned their first win over in franchise history down in Nashville. Losing that game 2-4, though. Player of the game, Ford Marcus Johansson with 2 assists, 2 points, a power play point, 1 shot on target. You go from there, start your road trip in Pittsburgh, playing a Pittsburgh. I mean, at least when I think of Pittsburgh and hockey, it's just they've been a good organization for several years, right? At least if you think about hockey, Pittsburgh's one of the teams that comes to mind.
Oh, yeah.
And they've just it's I don't know who do I compare them to. It kind of reminds me of not necessarily like a New England, but kind of like a Green Bay. They're always going to be competing.
Yeah.
Whether Aaron is there next year or not, But I mean, if you look at it like for a long time, they're always going to be competitive, right? And that's been Pittsburgh, and Seattle goes into Pittsburgh and wins that game 2-1 in overtime. All of the goals came after the midway point of the third period, which is insane to think. You've got a really tight game for the longest time, and you play a really good defensive game against Pittsburgh, who's got a lot of talent. Sidney Crosby's on that roster, Brad Marchand. I might be messing up Boston. It's tough because Boston and Pittsburgh have the same exact color scheme.
Yeah.
But you go and play a team like Pittsburgh who's consistently good and consistently does things, to where they're going to be successful, and you win that game on the road too. So I had 2 players of the game there, defenseman Adam Larson getting the game-winning goal in overtime, and goalkeeper Philip Grubauer. Grubauer had a great game for a good stretch of games here, has been really on a tear. And is kind of settled in and looked like the Grubauer that we were expecting when Seattle signed him to a 6-year deal and free agency, coming off of being a finalist for the best goaltender in the league award last season. Looking back here to those last 4 games. One of those was postponed.
Not 4.
Yes. The game on the 29th at the New York Islanders USB Arena, one of the newer arenas in the league with us, was postponed over weather concerns. The New York governor declared a weather-related state of emergency, that game being postponed to the 2nd. I know that, New York's an interesting place because you got the boroughs and everything, but it's interesting to me that game was canceled and the game at MSG was not canceled. I know that during the game they showed like a view of the streets, and because it's Manhattan, right? The streets are going to have to be a little bit better than maybe Long Island. But it was interesting to, this game against New York is canceled. Oh, this other New York game the next day, though, it's still good to go.
The Knicks are fine.
Yeah, so that next game, January 30th against the New York Rangers, a 2-3 loss. Unfortunately, Seattle tied that game up with about a minute to go in the third period, and then K'Andre Miller would come and score the game-winning goal for the Rangers. 30 seconds left in the period. Player of the game, Jared McCann, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points, and 2 shots on goal. Makes it his third consecutive game with the goal. In that game against New York, Seattle put up 42 shots on the best goalkeeper in the league, Igor Shesterkin. Couldn't get the puck past him more than twice. I mean, 42, that's the most they've shot all season.
Yeah, and that was a loss later in that game, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because that was
seconds left, I believe. They won the game. Yeah.
So tough situation there to tie that game up. Similar to the Pittsburgh game where you're playing a tough game against a good team. You're holding on for the longest time. You tie it up. You think you're heading to overtime, getting a point at least. Then it all change. But hey, again, as I've said, weeks before when this team was on losing streaks, and even before Bel was here, it's like this is an expansion team. They're working on things. It's their first year. You're not going to see that immediate success. Vegas has been an outlier. I think everybody has finally come to understand that. I know earlier in the season, it was like, oh, why? Vegas did it. It's like, no, it's a different situation. The teams are much more acclimated to the expansion draft format now.
We're all enjoying the inaugural season, right?
That's how I've looked at it, right? Because you've got this team, probably see some turnover next year. I wouldn't doubt it. But at least not this season, right? You want to see who's, hey, we've seen good things, or hey, maybe we've made the wrong decision with the draft here or signing, and Seattle has a lot of cap space to play with next offseason. So that's something that will come into play. And your number 2 overall pick, who is playing for Team USA in the Olympics, will join the team next season, more than likely. So, things to look forward to. But overall, over the last few weeks, I can't complain. I mean, they've played good games. They've beat tough teams, and your goaltender has looked good. So, can't complain. Looking into team news, on the 24th of January, the Kraken recalled defenseman Cale Fleury, yes, brother of Hayden Fleury, to the taxi squad from the Charlotte Checkers and reassigned, goaltender Antoine Bibeau to Charlotte. On the 27th, Bibeau was reassigned to the taxi squad. And then on the 30th, the day of the Rangers game, Calle Jarnkrok was ruled out of the game due to an upper body injury. Did go through warm-ups, but was ruled out of the game. And then in the game, forward Carson Kuhlman was ruled out with a upper body injury as well. No current up-to-date status on that. It's funny with hockey injuries because it's either an upper body injury or a lower body injury.
So vague.
And no in between, right? Because other leagues, it's like, sprained ankle maybe, knee contusion, broken hand, like with broken hand. Jaden Schwartz, who should be back in a few weeks, his injury was upper body injury for the longest time, and then we find out he broke his hand. It's
hockey's still technically upper body, I guess.
Oh, yes, but it's funny how that works, Looking ahead here for Seattle, they sit now at a 14-win, 26-loss, 4-overtime loss record, equaling 32 points. The division standing is still 8th. I think it might be tough for us to crawl out of that spot for a bit at least. Their next few games are the first at the Boston Bruins, another tough team to play against, especially on the road. Starting at 4 o'clock Pacific time, and then that rescheduled game February 2nd at the New York Islanders with the 4 o'clock Pacific time start. Heading over to our OL Reign here, who, similar to WNBA free agency, will begin sort of their season in a way on the 1st tomorrow. The Reign made a bunch of roster moves similar to the way that, they've been doing as well, but also the Sounders have been doing, re-signing more players. The team signed defender Alyssa Melanson to a 1-year deal with a 1-year option. The team waived defender Amber Brooks, which, as someone who interviewed Amber Brooks, it sucks, because it's, it's a nice, nice people, but, with these pro sports leagues, it's always a business. So that's how things work. And especially with the way that Seattle has added, I say Seattle, because technically they're not the Seattle Reign anymore, but they play back in Seattle. So I'm going to count it, right? when you've got as many players on defense as you do, and you've got younger players on defense, if you're a defender who's a little bit, he's not old, but you're not necessarily like mid-20s or lower, I think you're going to be the odd woman out in this situation, and that sucks. But ultimately, you're gunning for an NWSL title here, and you can't worry about making friends.
Right.
So, talking about defenders, the team re-signed club original defender Lauren Barnes to a one-year deal with a one-year option, so keeping your team captain in Seattle. The team signed Bethany Balser to a contract extension. It's a 3-year deal with a club option for an additional year, which could extend Balser's time with the club through the 2025 season. Bethany Balser winning the 2019 NWSL Rookie of the Year and being second in the league in goals scored last year, so having as much talent up front as you can with Bethany locked up is a good deal. The team, talking about forwards, the team re-signed Megan Rapinoe to a one-year deal, so keeping Megan around. And I want to touch on that really quickly because obviously Megan Rapinoe and Sue Bird are a couple, right? Her only signing, we look at all these other deals, they're one-year deals with a club option. Notice there's no club option on that deal, right?
No.
I have to think that, I've had a source that I've talked to with this about a good amount, since the press conference for Lumen Field being the home of the Reign came up. This is Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe's final year playing pro sports. I have to think about it because Sue Bird's announced that she's playing her final year.
Yeah.
And if Megan's only signing a one-year deal and is kind of getting into that 40 range, and it's not saying anything about being old, it's just 40 is kind of the year where most pro athletes kind of hang things up, right? At least in most sports, at least the ones we cover.
Right.
You have to think that this is the year, right? They both go out, they're done, they get to live their lives and, make impacts in other ways. I have to think that, at least with Sue returning for one more year and Megan signing only a one-year deal.
It makes sense. And Sue was ready to retire, but she obviously opted to come back. And so why not play another year if you're Megan Rapinoe? Why not just decide that you're also going to be done and go on and live your life, like you said, and make significant changes in other ways? So,
and no doubt, in whatever Sue and Megan do past their career, they'll make an impact, right?
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see how this season plays out for both of them, because you're looking at teams who, both made the playoffs last season, didn't reach the ultimate goal of a title, and are looking to build up and get to that title position. The Reign, both teams, are looking to make that big signing that pushes you over the edge, right? The Reign have signed a bunch of players and have brought back a bunch of their key contributors, but haven't really brought in somebody who has put them over the edge. A bunch of the different teams around the league, Kansas City, North Carolina, Portland here and there, have made moves that kind of say, hey, we're pushing for a title. And I can't necessarily right now say that about the Reign. I know we've got time. There are still chances that Lyon could loan some of their talented players over to their sister team in the Reign. But at the current moment, it's you'd like to see a little bit more. The team, as the final roster move, did sign midfielder Rose Lavelle to a 2-year deal that runs through the 23 season. So that's good to have all of that talent up front. But like I said, you'd like to add that cherry on top, that finishing piece that says, hey, we're ready to win a title. We're going to compete for it. We want to get past, we want to actually make the championship instead of making it to the round that gets you into the championship, right? Because getting the bye week is fine, but if you don't get into the championship, it doesn't matter. It's like you did nothing.
Yeah.
So that's something to look forward to as preseason for the Reign begins tomorrow on the 1st. So looking back at it, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, a lot of stuff starts this week, which is going to be exciting to get back into it because, for the longest time it was, off season this, the Kraken are still kind of doing things, but everybody else, free agent rumors here and there. The Mariners still kind of in that purgatory because of the lockout. But we're going to get some teams starting things up. So that'll be exciting to get into and maybe a little bit stressful, but we'll be here for it next week. So do you have any sort of closing reflection marks on that?
Just excited to see what comes this week. I think my favorite notifications are the ones that make me gasp. So that will be interesting to see what different moves these agencies make.
So with that being said, Charles and Bel here with you for Circling Seattle Sports on Converge. Until we see you back next time, stay safe, be well, and take care of yourself.